I gasped as my throat constricted, clawing at my chest like it wanted to rip me apart, and the room spun into a blur of crystal glasses and expensive perfume. My tongue swelled instantly, taste buds screaming betrayal, and I realized, too late, that Sloane had done it. She had slipped crab oil into my soup, right there in front of the entire VIP crowd. The panic hit me like a freight train. I was going to die, and everyone was watching. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. I collapsed into the velvet armchair, arms flailing for air, as the polite hum of Sloane's promotion party twisted into a horrifying echo. Laughter bubbled somewhere across the room, but it wasn't mine. My vision narrowed, white dots exploding in the corners as I tried to call out, but my voice was gone. I caught a glimpse of her, my sister, smiling like a goddess of cruelty, greeting Magnus Thorne as though nothing had happened. I had always suspected she loved the spotlight more than she loved family, but this was an execution. Magnus lunged toward me before I even realized he'd moved, a tiny metal device in his hand that he pressed into my thigh. Relief crashed over me with the force of a tidal wave as the EpiPen's adrenaline clawed through my veins. My pulse slowed, my throat reluctantly opened, and for a brief, dizzying moment, I could breathe again. I looked at Sloane, hoping, foolishly, for a flicker of remorse. Nothing. Just the calculated poise of someone who had always underestimated me, thinking my quiet life among ancient tomes meant I couldn't fight back. The chef and the server hovered nearby, eyes wide, whispers brushing against the edges of the room. Their testimony was unspoken, but deafening. Sloane had orchestrated this, every ingredient a weapon, every smile a mask. I realized then that my sister had turned the party into a stage, with me as the star of a humiliation no one would forget. I wanted to scream, to strike, to melt the floor beneath her, but survival demanded strategy over rage. I left the party on a stretcher, the sterile hospital lights replacing crystal chandeliers, and I swore silently that this wasn't over. Sloane had money, influence, charm, but she underestimated what it meant to be overlooked, to work in silence, to plot quietly while everyone else applauded the wrong person. I began collecting evidence. Medical records, witness statements, even the chef's subtle notes about the soup's preparation. Each page, each whisper became a weapon sharper than any anger. As I pieced it together, a horrifying thought gnawed at me. If Sloane had succeeded, I wouldn't just have been humiliated, I'd be dead, my story erased before it even began. And yet, somewhere in the hospital's sterile hum, a fire lit inside me. I wasn't going to let her win, and I wasn't going to scream or cry in the open. I would do what she never could, turn tragedy into triumph, betrayal into a ladder to success. But just as I began to plan, my phone buzzed with a notification that made my blood run cold. A photo from the party, tagged with Sloane's smug grin, floated on social media, and in the background, something else caught my eye, a shadow of evidence she hadn't realized I noticed. My stomach dropped. This was bigger than revenge. This was about survival, and the truth was about to explode in a way no one would see coming. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, heart hammering, replaying every cruel twist of Sloane's smile. By morning, the panic had faded, replaced with something colder, sharper, calculation. She had thought I'd crumble, thought my quiet life among dust and ink meant I couldn't fight back. She had no idea I'd already begun building my counterstrike, piece by meticulous piece. The first step was undeniable proof. I called the chef under the guise of needing culinary advice for a personal project, listening carefully as he recounted every step of the soup's preparation. His voice trembled with loyalty and fear, confirming what I had feared and hoped for. She had plotted this, measured it, perfected it. Every word, every pause became a brick in the fortress I was constructing around my revenge. Next came the server, the silent witness who had hovered by the hors d'oeuvres table. I met him at a quiet cafe, far from the buzz of Thorn Global. I didn't smile, I didn't negotiate, I simply listened. He spoke softly, confirming the whispers I had overheard, the glance of complicity Sloane never thought I'd notice. It was terrifying, realizing the extent of her audacity, but exhilarating too. For the first time, I could see the shape of victory. Meanwhile, Sloane strutted through the aftermath as if nothing had happened, posting photos of herself with Magnus Thorne, basking in a promotion that cost her nothing except the soul of her younger sister. She was untouchable on the surface, untouchable in the eyes of everyone who didn't know the truth. But I had something more valuable than appearances, facts, records, and a plan that would slice through her charade like a scalpel. I spent nights at my desk, surrounded by antique texts and the faint scent of waxed paper, drafting a strategy that was precise, surgical. Legal channels, civil claims, documentation, all of it orchestrated in silence. I wasn't going to confront her with screams or threats. I would hit her where it hurt most, her bank account, her reputation, the illusion of power she carried like a crown. Every dollar she thought she'd gained through manipulation would be meticulously reclaimed. Weeks passed, each one a test of patience and restraint. I monitored her social feeds, her public appearances, and every slip she made, every tiny sign of arrogance was cataloged, cross-referenced with witness statements and my medical documentation. People admired Sloane for her poise, for her charm, but behind the scenes, she was unraveling, and I was the quiet storm gathering strength. Then came the turning point, a meeting with my attorney. I laid out everything, the allergy, the deliberate poisoning, the witnesses, the party photos, and the chilling calm with which Sloane had executed her plan. The attorney's eyes widened, then narrowed with respect. Mila, you don't just have a case, you have leverage that could ruin her. I felt a thrill that had nothing to do with vengeance and everything to do with justice. I was no longer the underestimated sister. I was the architect of her downfall. But as the first legal notices were drafted, I caught wind of a rumor. Sloane had begun to suspect she might be in trouble. She wasn't panicking yet, but there was a shadow behind her polished smile, a tremor in her perfection she projected. And that shadow was only the beginning, because if she realized what I was capable of too soon, she might strike back first, and then everything I had built in silence could be in jeopardy. Sloane's first misstep came sooner than I expected. A brash email to a colleague, a slip in a public comment, a hint of panic in her perfectly rehearsed smile. It was enough. I pounced, quietly, legally, surgically. Every witness, every medical report, every time-stamped photo and whispered confession was laid out with precision, a web so airtight that no one could deny the truth. The irony was delicious. She had used the party to humiliate me, but I was using evidence to humiliate her in a way that no party could mask. I demanded accountability, restitution, and a price that would shake her confidence to its core. $900,000, a figure that would leave her reeling, financially vulnerable, stripped of the smug security she had worn like an armor. Sloane's charm, her manipulation, her power over appearances was worthless against documented truth. I watched as she realized that no smile, no apology, no pleading could save her from the consequences of her cruelty. When the settlement hit, I felt a surge of something I had never allowed myself before. Vindication, yes, but also freedom. I invested every penny into coal conservation and restoration, a business I had dreamed of quietly while the world assumed I was invisible. Clients began to call, intrigued by my reputation for precision and integrity. Slowly, meticulously, I built a name that belonged to me alone, an empire of skill and patience, not inherited privilege or deception. The best part wasn't the money or the business, it was the clarity of self. Friends who had doubted me, colleagues who had overlooked me, even Sloane herself, they saw a transformation that was impossible to ignore. The sister who had tried to destroy me now was a cautionary footnote in a story I was writing with my own hands. My days of hiding in quiet corners among fragile books had given way to boardrooms, contracts, and clients who trusted my meticulous care as if it were magic. Years later, I stood in my studio, sunlight streaming through tall windows on polished oak shelves, breathing in the smell of wax and restored leather. Coal conservation and restoration had grown beyond anything I dared to imagine, and I was finally, fully, the architect of my own life. Sloane? She was a ghost of ambition gone wrong, a lesson carved into my past. I smiled at the contrast, the sister who had tried to destroy me and the woman I had become, resilient, triumphant, intouchable. And yet, the memory of that party, the taste of betrayal, and the shadow of near death lingered in the corners of my mind. It was a reminder, a compass, a proof that survival wasn't about luck. It was about vigilance, strategy, and the quiet power of patience. I had turned humiliation into triumph, poison into fortune, and betrayal into independence. In the end, I realized something beautiful. The greatest revenge wasn't in punishment. It was in building a life Sloane could never touch, no matter how she tried. As I closed a restored manuscript and set it on the shelf, I felt a thrill I hadn't expected. The story wasn't just hers or mine. It was mine entirely, every twist, every scar, every victory. And for the first time, I was free from fear, free from family illusions, free to rise as high as my own ambition and skill could take me. But somewhere deep down, I knew that Sloane's shadow would always remind me that power was fragile and survival was everything.